one of the great things about being a gardener is that depending on what I plant, I can attract a lot of wildlife into my garden. And we love sitting around our secret garden or out here in the yard and watching the butterflies and the bees just hop around from plant to plant. Hi, I'm Sonia with Suburban Gardening, and today I'd like to talk to you about milkweed. Milkweed is a wonderful plant in the respect that it's the host plant for the monarch caterpillar, which is really cool, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it's also a great plant that puts out a lot of nectar for hummingbirds and bees and different pollinators that we love to see in our yard. Now, I did want to mention one thing. And where I live in California in Zone 10, there is a lot of controversy about monarch butterflies and milkweed. What I would like to show you today is my experience growing milkweed in my garden, how to plant it, how it's super easy to grow from seeds, and how to prune it, because pruning it is one of the best ways you can keep the plant healthy, and that keeps the monarch caterpillars healthy, which makes more butterflies. There is a plethora of information about milkweed and monarchs out there on the internet. So what I recommend is for whatever state or country that you're in, whatever zone that you're in, go ahead and look up for your specific area. But planting, pruning, and growing from seeds, that's all basically about the same thing. Now, it's early spring and my milkweed is starting really to bounce back and come to life. You can start growing milkweed from seeds as long as it's 48 degrees or warmer at your lowest point. So it's very, very easy to grow. You do not need grow lights and all that kind of stuff. Just put it out in early spring and it will start to come to life. This is a narrowleaf milkweed plant. And I purchased it last year and it did exactly what it's supposed to in my area. So they would call this a native to Southern California. And it grows here just like it's supposed to. It dies down in the wintertime, and then it comes back in the spring when the monarchs are going to be coming. I expect them to be here in about 2 weeks. This is a tropical milkweed. Now, it's got a little bit thicker leaves, and it is not native to California. So what happens with this is that it doesn't actually die all the way down. And therein comes the controversy. But I can tell you what I do to keep these plants really healthy so that all of our monarchs and our butterflies stay really healthy. I did want to show you one that has a flower. These are called blood flowers. This is a tropical milkweed. And this is the little guy that makes all the nectar that brings in the pollinators. Here I have several different types of seeds. I have common milkweed, showy milkweed, butterfly weed, and then there's purple, there's yellow, there's all different types. Well, the ones that grow naturally in my area, and they're called natives, are the ones that I don't particularly like. They're the narrowleaf, and the problem with the narrowleaf, it gets infested with aphids, and when the caterpillars are on there feeding, I can't do anything to get rid of the aphids because I'll also kill the butterflies. So we don't want to do that. So today I'm just going to focus on tropical milkweed and show you how I go ahead, because they get some aphids, but not nearly as much as the natives. Now, one really cool thing about all the milkweed, it grows in a little pod. The seeds grow in a little pod. And then when the pod cracks open, all this little fuzzy stuff comes out, carrying the seeds all over your garden. And therein is a problem, because if it's very aggressive, you'll be having milkweed popping up everywhere, including your neighbor's yard. So I like to keep the milkweed where I can get at it with my snippers, and a lot of times I'll just snip off those seed pods. But let me show you how I grow milkweed from seeds. And keep in mind, the reason that I'm doing this in particularly is because right behind me is a hill and a big field. And the part that I can use is 100 feet by 12 feet. And my plan and my dream is to grow a butterfly garden out there. And I am going to need a lot of pollinating type of plants. I'm going to need milkweed out there for the monarch butterflies, plus other plants. And I'll be making videos for that too. So be sure and subscribe so you won't miss any of the episodes. But I want to show you how super easy it is to start any milkweed, whatever region you're in, from a seed. What I have here is a 5-gallon bucket, and it is a little overkill. But when I tip it, and you guys can look down inside, there are all kinds of little milkweed sprouts coming up in there. All I did was I had a handful of milkweed seeds that I had taken from one of my plants. I dropped them down in there and I just scurried it around a little bit. I set it over by where my watering hose is, and I just kept it moist. And before you know it, 3 weeks later, I have a bunch of milkweed coming up. Now, let me show you what it looks like. I did the same thing with this plant right here, and it's gotten so big. Actually, I let it get this big because I wanted to show you how to get it out of this pot. But look at how beautiful it is, absolutely beautiful. Now, this technique is a little bit of a favorite of mine because now I know which one of these seeds is the strongest, and those are the ones I'm going to keep. Some of them that aren't so strong, I'm not going to hold on to those because they'll never really grow and do much. So let me get some potting soil and show you how to get these out of here so we can get them out in the garden, or maybe just pot them up so we can move them around. What I have in my bucket is just regular potting soil. A lot of times, if you watch my videos, you'll hear me say premium potting soil. I'm not using the premium today. Milkweed doesn't need premium potting soil, but it does need good, rich, healthy soil. And I've noticed that with all of my milkweed around my garden, the milkweed that grows the best is the milkweed that's in very nutritious soil. So even though you don't have to even though you don't have to feed your milkweed all the time, giving it a good strong start in the beginning and giving a good strong feeding right at the springtime, it'll cause that milkweed to grow very big and very strong. So let's see if we can get this milkweed out of the pot and into a couple of different containers. I don't want to break anybody, so I'm going to be careful. Now, you can see how hardy they are. See all those roots on here? These roots are so hardy. One thing about milkweed is that they don't like their roots being messed with. Here I am messing with them. I hear that people say that all the time, you know, the bougainvillea, they don't like their roots being messed with. Well, I mess with them all the time and they don't seem to mind. This plant minds. So what's going to happen is I'm going to transplant these. I have to break it apart. So I'm going to transplant these into different sized pots, and they're going to be pretty mad at me. So I'm going to keep them in the shade and keep them well watered for a few days until they're not offended anymore. Then I can put them out in the sun and they're going to be just great. As gently as I can, I am going to pull this guy apart. And once I do that, I'll be able to get at the individual plants, and I'm going to put them in different pots. Now, these really large ones, this one right here, they're going to go into a 1 gallon pot. The smaller ones are going to go into a quart-sized pot. I'm trying to keep as much of the dirt around the root ball as possible because that will make it so they're not so mad. Now, this was another one that's really big, and see how much of the dirt came off. They're not going to be happy about that. But I'm going to go ahead and put him down in here, nice and deep. And I think that he'll be just fine. I need to quickly water them in. I'm going to pot up the rest of these and I'm going to put them in the shade. That way they won't be any more stressed out than I've already caused them. And in a couple of days, they'll be just fine. If you wanted to try planting your milkweed a little more conventionally than that, because that is a little risky, you can just put them in a quart size, or you can put them in a 6-pack, however you like to do it. And I gathered up these seeds last year in the fall when all of the seeds were coming out on the milkweed. And basically, I would just put a couple of seeds down in one of these quarts rough them up a little bit. They need to be buried about 1/4 of an inch. Keep it watered. It'll come up, and then you'll have them in there. Or you can put them in your 6-pack. And I would put 2 seeds to each cell. There we go. And just rough them up, stick them down in there. You don't need to put a dome on these. You don't need to do anything extra special. They'll grow just beautifully like that as long as you keep them moist. And I don't put them in full sun. I just put them where there's a lot of bright light and they can get maybe a little bit of sun. The most important thing is don't let it dry out. So that's the more conventional way to do it. There's one other way that you can propagate milkweed, and I'm just going to show you it real quick because I do this a lot. And that is when you're out there, like I will be today, trimming your milkweed, you can go ahead and put it in just any kind of a little container that you have that has water in it. And I did these with 3 of the milkweed stems. And as you can see, this one has a nice long stem on it. These will probably root pretty soon too. And basically all you need to do is have a container with dirt in it. Let me get my glove on. Put your thumb or your finger down in there, make a nice deep hole. And then the stem that have the rooting on it, very gently put it down inside. Now, one really neat thing about milkweed is it has a characteristic of tomatoes. And I mean by that is that all of these leaf nodes that are on this stem, each one of those will grow roots. So the deeper you plant it, the more roots that you're going to get and the stronger plant that you're going to have. I'm out here on my hill. This is the area that I hope to make a beautiful butterfly sanctuary one day, a place where pollinators can come and be away from the people in the cars and all the madness that's out there. But what I have right here is my very first milkweed. I bought it about 4 years ago. I actually bought 2. And I think a raccoon or a gopher or something carried off the other one. I don't know, but this is kind of the Wild West out here. But I wanted to show you that I do prune back my tropical milkweed every year. And the reason I do that is because there is a disease. It's short. The short way to say it is OE. I'll put the actual name up on the screen. But if you don't get that down every year, it actually kills the monarch butterfly caterpillars. The butterflies land on the plant to get the nectar, and they hop around from milkweed to milkweed, and they actually spread this bacteria. And once it gets on the plant, it does kill the little caterpillars. I highly recommend, if you're going to grow tropical milkweed, go ahead and cut it almost to the ground. At least get all of the leaves down. Now, actually, this makes this plant much healthier. And it'll grow back stronger, it'll grow back thicker, and it'll have more leaves for those caterpillars to eat and for the butterflies to lay their eggs on. So just like with most plants, a milkweed has leaf nodes. And what you want to do is cut right above a leaf node. And then what will happen is the leaves will start to come out and it'll make new branches. And this plant will be much stronger and we'll avoid that terrible OE on our plants. Milkweed also is a great plant because once this thing is established, it's pretty well drought tolerant. It does not get a lot of water out here on the hill. I call this the Wild West. Not a lot of water, and it does great. So like I said, it's a 4-year-old plant. Now the new ones, they do need quite a bit of water when they're first getting started till those roots get way down. I try to keep the weeds down over here. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put some mulch. And I'm going to rough the soil up a little bit around here so the mulch won't just drip down the hill. But this mulch also has planktone in it. And I'll put a link for that planktone. I use it all the time. It's a wonderful fertilizer for your garden. So it's mulch mixed with planktone, and that will feed this plant for the rest of the season. I won't have to worry about it a bit. Now, I will let nature take care of itself out here because when it rains or when there's actually sprinklers out here, when that happens, all of this good nutrition will leach down into the soil and this plant will be good for the rest of the year and it's going to get huge. So I'm expecting to see a lot of monarch butterflies and other pollinators around this plant. Before we go any further, I just have a few more things to show you, but I wanted to introduce you to somebody. This is Polka Dots, and she was born right here in my garden last year, right about the summertime. Now she was born, her egg was laid on one of my milkweed plants. She hatched into a tiny little caterpillar, and then she ate and ate and ate, got so big, turned into a pupa, and then she was born into a beautiful butterfly. Now she's resting on a zinnia that I had in my garden last year, and we'll definitely be putting more of those out because the butterflies love zinnias. But I thought it would be great if I could introduce you to polka dots because we had about 35 monarchs born in our garden last year that we could count, and it was so wonderful. The milkweed is the host plant for the monarch butterfly caterpillar. And the butterflies come by and they will only lay their eggs on milkweed. Now, it can be any different variety, but they only lay their eggs on milkweed. And that's why it's so critical as a host plant. The big problem is that we've taken away a lot of the habitat for the monarch butterflies, for a lot of the butterflies. It's been my observation that the butterflies, especially the monarchs, they don't mind if the milkweed is in your garden or if it's out in a field somewhere. They just need their host plant so they can continue to grow their family. Now, there's a lot of reports out there, and I know that people are really tracking the monarchs. And in California, we have about 80% decrease in monarch butterflies for about the last 10 years. So anytime you can help bring the butterflies back and put their host plant, I think that's a great thing. One thing I did notice last year with our milkweed and those monarch caterpillars is they're hungry little critters, and they will eat up all of your milkweed. So the more you have out there, the more butterflies you're going to have. And I just think that's an awesome thing. And one little thing I did want to show you before we sign off today is that how do you tell if it's a milkweed plant? Well, the best way to tell, try to get in close, is snip off one of the leaves. Let me find a big leaf right here. Snip off one of the leaves, and if a milky residue comes out, just like on this one, then you know that it's milkweed. Or you could actually snip the stem. So if you can see right here on the stem, it's actually dripping milk. I'll try to get a close-up of that. There's a little bit of milk right there. That definitely means it's a milkweed. Now, many plants do that. The milkweed in particular does that. I probably imagine that's why they called it this. Well, there are so many fun things to do in the garden. You guys, I've got so many videos coming up. We're going to be making 2 butterfly gardens, one to my right and one right behind me. We have so many things coming up on how to make beautiful patios in your yard and grow beautiful flowers. I have the greatest video coming up about a little bit of yard art. I normally don't do that, but it's going to be great. So I hope you'll subscribe, be sure and like the video, and thanks for stopping by, you guys. I'll see you next time.